A young man found himself reincarnated into another world, awakening an extraordinary ability called water manipulation. This skill did not merely grant him control over water, it also allowed him to tame fierce aquatic beasts, turning them into his loyal companions. However, he did not stop there. He pushed these creatures beyond their natural limits, evolving them into terrifying sea monsters. The story unfolded in a distant land where Leang stood in a daze, mesmerized by the breathtaking view of the rising sun. The golden light painted the sky, and the crisp morning air filled his lungs. It was a peaceful, surreal moment. Before he could lose himself completely in the scenery, his father's voice called out to him, snapping him back to reality. The sound, though seemingly unfamiliar at first, carried warmth and comfort. Without hesitation, he rushed to his father, determined to make the most of the day. That morning, they spent their time on the lake, checking their catch. It was an ordinary day, yet it held a simple joy, the kind he had not experienced in a long time. A crab latching onto his foot, his father nearly choking from laughter, and the playful scribbles they carved into their boat for no reason at all. It was enough to make him forget everything else. Time passed unnoticed until the sun began to set. Before heading back, they sat by the shore to enjoy the view a little longer. That was when he spotted a red carp swimming by, its scales shimmering under the fading sunlight. It was a rare sight, and without thinking twice, Leang dived into the water. The moment he hit the surface, the fish vanished, and with it, the lake was eerily empty, devoid of any signs of life. No matter how hard he tried, he could not move forward, as though something held him in place. Suddenly, his chest tightened, his limbs grew heavy, and all he could think about was hoping his father would pull him out. But the world around him dimmed, and in an instant, he woke up, except his father was no longer there. Instead, two strangers stood before him. Reality sank in. The day he had spent with his father had been nothing more than a dream. In truth, he had been captured, bound by these men. Zhang, the one he had trusted, had deceived him. Rather than guiding them as he had believed, they had only used him as bait for a water monster. It was a cruel fate, yet Leang remained calm. This was not his first life. Leang was a transmigrator from another world. A month had passed since he had arrived in this realm, taking over this body. The original owner had perished from illness, and somehow he had ended up in his place. His mother had died in childbirth, leaving him to be raised by his father alone. For years, it had just been the two of them, until 3 months ago, when his father succumbed to a respiratory disease. Now, all the emotions, grief, loneliness, and longing had become his own. He had never known what it was like to grow up with a family, yet in the past month, he had adapted to the former owner's relationships and daily life. During this time, he had also made a startling discovery. This world was anything but ordinary. It possessed extraordinary powers, where people trained their bodies and minds to surpass human limits. Those who succeeded were known as cultivators, but it was not just humans who could evolve through training. Animals could as well. Those who did became mythical beasts. As if on cue, a creature emerged from the depths of the lake. Even Zhang, a seasoned cultivator, felt his legs go weak at the sight of it. He had expected the water beast to be no longer than half a meter, but the information had been entirely wrong. When it surfaced, it easily rocked the boat, sending waves of panic through everyone on board. Still, Yang was not one to back down without a fight. He had trained for 10 years, and if the beast wished to devour them, it would have to work for it. The second the creature lunged, Yang retaliated, unleashing his most powerful attack. But the beast was colossal. Its jaws alone dwarfed him. Before he could even register what was happening, he was gone, swallowed whole like a mere snack. The impact shattered the boat into pieces, sending the remaining man into absolute panic. This was never part of the plan. He had no intention of dying here. Desperation took over, and in a last-ditch effort to save himself, he stabbed Liang's hand and threw him into the water, hoping the scent of blood would serve as a distraction. Bound by restraints, Leang sank rapidly, but he refused to surrender. He thrashed against the ropes, biting into the rough fibers. After several agonizing moments, they loosened just enough for him to break free. However, another problem arose. His oxygen was running out, and he had already sunk too deep. Darkness crept into his vision, and just as he was about to lose consciousness, a vision appeared stood before him, his father's arm reaching out. He knew it wasn't real, yet his body reacted instinctively, stretching his hand forward. To his surprise, he grasped something solid, a log, the very same one from his father's boat, the one they had carved their faces into all those years ago. A rush of emotions, gratitude, relief, and even warmth, despite the freezing water, overwhelmed him. Somehow, even in death, his father had saved him once again. But the moment was short-lived. The scent of his blood had spread, and the monster had caught it. Before he could react, sharp teeth clamped onto his leg, dragging him further into the depth. The pressure in his chest built, the light above faded completely, and he was pulled into the beast's lair. The sight before him sent a chill down his spine. Countless bodies long devoured, wrecked boats reduced to fragments, and piles of treasure glimmering like a cruel joke in the darkness. He had done everything he could to survive, but now it was clear there was no escape. With his last breath, he closed his eyes and whispered a silent apology to his father. Soon he would be joining him, but the water beast had other plans. Instead of finishing him off, it slammed him to the ground, toying with him like a predator playing with its food. Pain erupted through his body, but then something unexpected occurred. His blood, drifting through the water, seeped into the lake bed and touched something ancient, an artifact buried beneath the wreckage, a water cauldron. At that moment, an ancient being stirred. A surge of power coursed through Liang's body, foreign yet strangely familiar. The energy adapted to him, shaping itself into something he could instinctively understand. It resembled the game systems he had once played before transmigrating, and in that instant, his ability awakened: water manipulation. The change was immediate. The water surrounding Leang was no longer his enemy. It had become his domain. His wounds closed, his body strengthened, and suddenly it felt as though he was standing on solid ground. The resistance of the water seemed to vanish, leaving him to question how any of this was possible. As if in response to his thoughts, a system notification appeared, explaining everything. He had obtained a skill called water control, which granted him the ability to manipulate water currents and breathe underwater. It was a powerful skill, one that transformed the depths of the lake into his battlefield. Before Leang could fully process his newfound abilities, the beast struck again, lunging forward to devour him. But this time, Leang was no longer helpless. With a mere thought, the water twisted and surged, catching the beast mid-swim and suspending it in place. A rush of power filled him, an intoxicating sensation that made him realize he had no limits underwater. However, reality quickly set in. This power was new, and his control over it was far from perfect. The beast struggled, breaking free from his grip, and lunged again. Yet with his newfound mobility, Liang easily dodged the attack, slipping through the water as if it were second nature. Still, dodging alone wouldn't be enough. Without a weapon, Liang needed another way to defeat the beast. Just as that thought crossed his mind, the system responded. It turned out he wasn't just a simple water manipulator. He had another skill called blood domination, which allowed him to inscribe ancient runes using his own blood, forming contracts with aquatic spirit beasts. This revelation made his pulse quicken. It was exactly what he needed. In an instant, he formulated a plan. The moment the beast surged toward him again, Liang used water control to halt its movement just long enough to inscribe the necessary runes, creating a blood domination talisman. As soon as the beast broke free from his water hold, Liang weaved around its massive form and slammed the talisman onto its head. However, forming a contract was easier said than done. It became a battle of spiritual force. The beast fought back, lashing out with the intent to crush Liang's very soul. His vision darkened, his body stiffened, and for a moment, it felt as though the creature's will was overwhelming his own. But Leang had an advantage. His soul had lived twice. Drawing on its combined strength, he pushed back. His soul energy surged, overpowering the beast's resistance. In the end, he emerged victorious. The contract was sealed, and Liang floated back to the surface, breaking through the water with a deep, desperate inhale. The air filled his lungs, and for the first time since the ordeal began, he could finally breathe a sigh of relief. The beast emerged right after him, no longer an enemy but an ally. Its massive form loomed over the lake, its eyes locked onto Liang with newfound reverence. It had fully submitted to him. However, there was one problem. Liang couldn't exactly stroll back into the village with a gigantic water beast at his side. That would cause all kinds of trouble. Through their newly formed spiritual link, He ordered the beast to stay behind, summoning it only when needed. With that, the beast disappeared into the depths, retreating to its hidden lair, a good place to lay low. As for Leang, it was time to leave. The next day, the old man who had thrown him into the lake as bait arrived at the village, dragging along his crew and steward Jung. They weren't there to offer condolences, assuming Leang was already dead. Instead, the old man had his sights set on something else, Leang's father's fortune. In his mind, it was compensation for the botched mission. After all, their plan had failed, Xiao was dead, and someone had to pay for it. With that in mind, they marched straight to Liang's house. The moment they reached the door, they kicked it wide open, expecting an empty room. Instead, they froze. Standing right there was Leang, alive and well. For a moment, the entire group stood in stunned silence, their faces frozen in disbelief. However, the shock was short-lived. Steward Young's expression twisted into one of pure rage, directed squarely at the old Geyer. The steward had failed to verify the facts, but it didn't matter. He was already convinced that Liang Ku was responsible for the botched mission. Someone had to take the blame, and Young didn't hesitate to order his men to restrain Liang and teach him a harsh lesson. The death of Jiao wasn't just an inconvenience. It had cost Young a significant amount of money. To make matters worse, the entire village was now in danger because the beast was still at large. According to Jung and his men, all of this was Liang's fault, a claim that was entirely baseless. Liang vehemently refuted the accusations, shifting the blame back onto the old man. But the old Geyer was far too cunning to be cornered so easily. Instead, the old man flipped the script, pointing out Liang's miraculous survival. How could a mere brat like him return alive unless he had been working with the beast? With that, the accusation took a darker turn. Liang was no longer just a troublemaker. He was now being labeled a monster. The old man claimed that Liang had controlled the water beast and was responsible for Jiao's death. It was an absurd accusation, but Liang was no stranger to being labeled a freak. In his previous life, Liang had been an orphan, and the other children had treated him like a bad omen, a walking misfortune. Rumors had spread that orphans were cursed or prone to stealing, and no matter what he did, the stigma had never left him. But Liang wasn't the type to roll over and accept such treatment. He had endured enough in his past life, and he refused to be pushed around in this one, especially by someone as despicable as the old Geyer, who was already missing a tooth. Liang decided then and there that he would help the old man lose a few more. Without hesitation, Liang tackled the old Geyer, shoving him back with enough force to send him stumbling. He then locked onto the nearest basin of water. If they wanted him to be a monster so badly, fine. He would show them what a real monster looked like. Water surged up his arm, twisting and coiling like a living serpent. His anger sharpened his focus, and for a moment, he was ready to take every single one of them down with him. But just as he was about to unleash his power, his childhood friend arrived, rushing in alongside the village chief. The chief's voice cut through the chaos, carrying an authority that even Steward Young couldn't ignore. Though the chief appeared ancient, he was still an official of the dynasty, a figure of real power. This meant Jung had no choice but to comply. Before storming off, however, Jung shot the chief a venomous glare, vowing that his master, Xiao, would hear about this. The old Geyer, however, remained unfazed. He knew it was an empty threat. Even Jung's master would bow to the chief's authority. Once the confrontation had settled, Liang let out a slow breath and turned to the village chief, offering a nod of gratitude. With nothing else left to do, they left the scene. But Liang knew better. This wasn't the end. Situations like this would keep happening unless he took matters into his own hands. Determined to survive in this world, Liang made a decision. He would use his system to its fullest potential and grow stronger as quickly as possible. It was then that he noticed something strange. His water essence was increasing. At first he wasn't sure why, but then it clicked. His crocodile pet had something to do with it. Intrigued, Liang waited for nightfall before returning to the lake. Once there, he activated his spirit link to summon his water beast. When the creature finally surfaced, it was bite-sized, completely surprising Liang. Just as he was about to ask questions, the system chimed in, explaining that subdued and contracted beasts could adjust their body size at will to manage energy consumption. This made sense to Liang, but he wasn't there to admire his pet's new party trick. He wanted to uncover the source of the water essence he had sensed. Without delay, Liang commanded his small companion to lead the way. The crocodile dove into the water and Leang followed closely. The water beast guided him deeper into the lake, weaving through the murky depths until they slipped into a hidden underwater cave. The moment Leang stepped inside, his eyes widened in astonishment. Countless legendary spirit plants sprawled across the cave floor, glowing faintly with rich spiritual energy. He reached out, brushing his fingers against one, and immediately a system prompt appeared, offering him the option to absorb it. This was a loot drop Leang couldn't afford to pass up. In this world, spiritual materials and treasures absorbed extraordinary energies over time, making them incredibly valuable. Spirit plants in particular possessed unique effects depending on their properties. Rumor had it that in Gia Manor's backyard, there was a frozen pond where special vines grew at the bottom. These vines were so rare and powerful that Master Xiao used them to lure cultivators into servitude. Yet here Liang stood surrounded by a cave full of them. Absorbing these plants would undoubtedly boost his water essence exactly what he needed. Without wasting any time, Liang got to work. He gathered as many plants as he could. He briefly considered asking his beast for help, but when he glanced over, the crocodile was already bloated, having eaten a few plants itself. Seeing it floating around, clearly full and content, Liang decided to let it rest. After all, it had earned a nap for leading him to such a treasure trove. Once he had gathered everything, Liang began devouring the plants. With just one plant, his water essence increased by 1. Not only were these spirit plants incredibly beneficial, but they were also delicious, making it far too easy for him to consume them one after another. He kept eating, absorbing as much water essence as possible. The more he accumulated, the stronger his fusion with aquatic spirits would become, and the faster his aquatic beasts could evolve. There were so many plants that, for a moment, Liang felt like he had overindulged. But it was worth it. He had gained 25 water essence. Without hesitation, he invested it into his fusion with the water monkey bloodline, increasing it from 5% to 7.5%. This significant boost in power filled him with confidence. If he ever encountered those adversaries from before, he was certain he could take them on easily. However, that confrontation would have to wait. Leang had a more pressing issue. He was broke. Autumn was coming to an end, and during this season, crocodiles slowed down due to hibernation, meaning he couldn't rely on them for hunting. With time running out, Leang devised a simple plan. Exploit the crocodiles now and gather as much profit as possible before they became useless. With this in mind, he commanded his crocodile to hunt as many fish as it could. Soon, he had stacked up a huge haul, which he sold to the merchants. Unlike the hustling vendors from his previous life, the merchants in this world were far easier to negotiate with. Just like that, Liang's financial struggles were resolved. Now it was time to settle things with the old man who had tried to set him up. But before Liang could make a move, the old man played right into his hands. Apparently, the old man had been searching for Liang to apologize for their earlier misunderstanding. To show his sincerity, he invited Liang to a meal on his boat, just the two of them. Liang nearly laughed out loud at the blatant transparency of the old man's scheme. Instead of calling him out, however, Liang decided to play along. After all, this was exactly the opportunity he had been waiting for. A few hours before the meetup, the old geezer found himself in a dire situation. The steward's men had beaten him to a pulp for his failure. For the first time ever, the steward had been publicly humiliated in front of so many people, and he wasn't about to let that slide. However, killing the old man now would have been a waste. Their master Xiao still had use for him. Xiao needed specific materials to refine his pills materials that weren't easy to come by. Specifically, he needed a true orphan child. The old geezer was tasked with abducting Liang to send a clear message that they were not to be trifled with and to secure the rare material Xiao required. If he succeeded, he was promised immortality, a reward that drove him to the brink of madness. In his desperation, he even accepted a power-boosting seal, a dangerous tool that would temporarily push his strength far beyond its limits, just for this one mission. With this newfound confidence, the old man believed capturing Liang alive would be easy. However, instead of resorting to brute force, he decided to take a smarter approach: poison. His plan was simple: soup with a toxin that wouldn't kill him, but would weaken him enough to prevent resistance or screams. Unfortunately for the old man, Liang had no patience for such tricks. Instead of taking a sip, Liang chose violence. With a flick of his hand, a stream of water shot out, wrapping around the old man's head and suffocating him on the spot. The old man struggled, clawing at the invisible grip tightening around his face, but it was useless. He couldn't even scream. Then everything went black. The next thing the old man knew, he was waking up in darkness. Night had fallen, his body ached, his mind spun, and to his horror, he was tied up. Desperate, he tried to play innocent, asking Leang what he planned to do. But Leang wasn't fooled. He already had proof that the old man had been bribed. With this knowledge, Leang knew exactly what to do. He had the perfect place for people like the old man, the same spot where they had first encountered the water beast. Except this time the beast belonged to Leang. The old man, realizing the gravity of his situation, suddenly had a change of heart. He claimed he never wanted Leang to become a monster, and began apologizing profusely, promising to tell Leang everything if he spared his life. Surprisingly, Leang agreed, prompting the old man to spill the truth. He revealed that the steward wanted to abduct Leang, along with other orphans, because to the Jiao mansion they weren't people, they were materials. Specifically, they were ingredients needed to refine a celestial pill, a pill that could grant immortality. As soon as the old man finished speaking, he realized the gravity of his confession. In a desperate attempt to save himself, he claimed he was also a victim, forced into this role by the steward. But Leang didn't care. Whether forced or not, the old man knew too much, and that alone sealed his fate. No matter what excuses he made, he wasn't leaving alive. However, Leang knew this wasn't the end. The Xiao family's influence was vast, and the old man's sudden disappearance would eventually lead them straight to him. When that happened, Leang needed a way out. His only option now was to become a cultivator and fast. The quickest way to do that was to join a martial arts school. In the city of Pingyang, there were 3 prominent martial schools, but only one stood above the rest, the Yang School. It was widely known that the master of the Yang School possessed a legendary ability, the power to break gold and stone with his bare hands. This extraordinary skill and the school's formidable reputation kept it at the pinnacle of martial prowess. Leang believed that if he could join the Yang School, the Zhao family would think twice before targeting him. After all, if a member of the school were to disappear, the Yang School would not let such an offense go unnoticed. However, the main obstacle was the school's steep admission requirements. To gain entry, Leang needed at least 8 taels of silver, but he currently had only 2. Realizing he needed to earn more money quickly, he decided to return to hunting. Over the past few days, his swimming skills had improved significantly, largely thanks to his pet, which had become his sparring partner for speed training. Through this practice, Leang had developed a unique technique. By using his water control energy, he compressed water beneath his feet and released it all at once, propelling himself forward with a burst of speed. The downside was that the technique drained his energy rapidly and could only be used for short bursts. Still, it was effective for quick maneuvers. Just as Leang was preparing for another routine hunt, something unusual caught his attention. A peculiar fish glowing bright red swam into view. This was no ordinary fish. It was a spiritual fish. In this world, certain creatures could evolve under the influence of special energy, mutating into extraordinary forms. Examples included giant scorpion beetles, 2-headed razor-tooth sharks, and iron-fin whales. Spotting 2 spiritual fish right in front of him, Leang recognized this as an opportunity he couldn't afford to miss. Without hesitation, he ordered his crocodile companion to revert to its original size and chase one of the fish while he pursued the other. Using his newly developed technique, Leang quickly closed the distance. With a swift motion, he manipulated the water to create a bubble, trapping the fish and preventing it from escaping. Catching it proved surprisingly easy, and Leang felt a surge of triumph. But just as he began to celebrate, a powerful presence stirred in the depths below, signaling that greater challenges and dangers lay ahead. Leang had just placed the fish into his basket when, without warning, a massive water beast emerged from the depths. The creature swiftly wrapped itself around him and slammed him straight into the lake bed. The impact startled him, but he knew this wasn't the time to lose consciousness. Summoning his focus, Leang locked in and quickly realized he was facing the infamous 6-barbed fish, a fearsome predator known for devouring humans. To make matters worse, the beast possessed abilities eerily similar to his own. It conjured a massive water orb, preparing to launch a devastating attack. However, Liang's power far surpassed the creature's. With a swift motion, he shattered the orb before it could fully charge. This only enraged the beast further. It lashed out with its tail, but thankfully, the croc intervened just in time, intercepting the blow. Before the beast could recover, the croc unleashed a powerful move, the primary Lotus Special, slamming the creature into the ground. Seizing the opportunity, Leang stepped in, attempting to capture the beast using his blood talisman. However, the water beast's spiritual energy proved far stronger than the croc's, and things quickly took a turn for the worse. Leang's body began to spasm uncontrollably as his system crashed, flooding him with warning messages about mental overload. Despite the overwhelming strain, he refused to back down. He knew that if he failed, the beast would undoubtedly devour them both. Fueled by sheer willpower and an unyielding desire to survive, Leang pushed through the pain. In the end, his determination paid off, and he successfully subdued the creature. Much like the croc, the beast instantly shrank into a smaller, chunky form to conserve energy. Leang couldn't help but notice its round, pudgy appearance, which reminded him of a potential evolution, a tiger-head whale. Deciding that Chuni was the perfect name for the creature, Leang felt a sense of accomplishment. With the beast now under control, he turned his attention to the loot. True to form, the croc had managed to capture another spiritual fish during the chaos. Leang gave the croc a well-deserved pat on the head, feeling grateful for its assistance. To celebrate their victory, Leang decided to cook some of the fish. He also prepared a smaller spiritual fish, hoping to extract water essence from it. To his delight, the attempt was successful, yielding 18 points of water essence. The result left him ecstatic. If a small spirit fish could provide such a substantial amount, a larger one would likely yield triple that, enough to potentially break past a 10% fusion rate. Despite the temptation to use the essence immediately, Liang knew he had other priorities. He needed money to enroll in school, and that required careful planning. For now, he decided to hold back and focus on securing the funds he needed. The path ahead was challenging, but Liang was determined to succeed. Leang had just entered the Yixing market, where a massive crowd had gathered to buy goods. He had come to sell his spiritual fish, confident that this was the perfect place to attract the right customers. However, he was caught off guard by the sheer number of people packed into the marketplace, making him wonder if there was some kind of celebration happening. That's when he spotted a man holding up another spiritual fish. It didn't take long for Liang to figure out what was going on. A member of the Chen family had arrived, and he had brought his own spiritual fish to show off. That explained why the crowd was so large. Instead of feeling discouraged, Liang grew even more excited. This was the perfect opportunity. Without wasting a second, he pushed his way through the crowd, eager to see what the man had caught. Of course, Liang wasn't there just to spectate. He was a master manipulator, so the moment he got close, he made sure to use the limelight, proudly displaying the spirit fish he had caught. But to his surprise, instead of drawing excitement, the crowd reacted with confusion. His fish wasn't met with awe, but with outright rejection. People started saying it didn't look like a spiritual fish at all, just some ugly, deformed creature that only a clueless newbie would bother catching. Before he knew it, the mockery began. The crowd didn't hold back, openly laughing at him. Even Chen, the so-called expert in spirit fish, was smirking, as if he were watching a fool embarrass himself. Just then, a cultivator arrived, instantly drawing the attention of the crowd. It was Hu Qi, a respected master from the Yang martial arts school. Since Chen was standing closer, the cultivator's gaze naturally fell on the crimson bloodfish in his hands. Without hesitation, Hu Qi asked for the price. Recognizing the man's high status, Chen didn't dare throw out a number himself. Instead, he humbly let the cultivator decide what he thought was fair. With that, Hu Qi casually offered 3 taels. The moment the words left his mouth, Chen's eyes widened. This amount was far more than he had ever expected. But just as the deal was about to be finalized, Liang suddenly whipped out his own fish for the cultivator to see. The onlookers, still riding high on their mockery, thought Liang was setting himself up for further humiliation. Some even chuckled, convinced he was about to be completely shut down. However, the cultivator's reaction was the complete opposite. The moment his eyes landed on Leang's creature, he was visibly excited. He identified it as a horned pommet, a rare and highly valued spirit fish. Without hesitation, Hu Qi offered 6 taels for it. The entire market was stunned. They had been completely wrong, and the amount of money offered was more than what most families could save in generations. Now they realized who the foolish one really was, and it definitely wasn't Leang. Even Chen, who had just been basking in his own success, was left speechless. No amount of arrogance could cover the fact that Leang had outshined him completely. However, with such a large sum of money, shock quickly turned to envy. One man in the crowd even made a veiled threat against Leang, disguising it as a joke. But Leang didn't let it bother him. He simply went on with the transaction, completely unbothered by the stares. With that, Chen had no choice but to back away, knowing full well that his fish was no longer of any interest to the cultivator. But before handing over the fish, Leang, ever the opportunist, saw a chance to dig for more information. If his fish was worth double the price of a crimson blood fish, he wanted to know why. Casually, he asked Hu Qi about it. Luckily for him, the cultivator was in a good mood and didn't mind explaining. It turned out that the horned pommet was a key ingredient in medicine used to craft special pills. These pills weren't just ordinary supplements. They strengthened essence and refined energy, helping cultivators break through the blood flow barrier, a crucial stage in martial cultivation. As fate would have it, Hu Qi was currently at that exact bottleneck, making the fish extremely useful to him. With this, Leang's perspective widened. He had only been thinking about selling fish for money, but now he realized their true value in cultivation. This was huge. Grateful for the insight, he sincerely thanked the cultivator, knowing that this knowledge would serve him well in the future. A little while later, Leang sat in an alley, counting his money, when someone appeared behind him. It was Libo, his childhood friend, who had come looking for him after hearing about what had happened. Libo congratulated Leang for bringing pride to their village, something Leang definitely appreciated. Seizing the opportunity, Leang also took a moment to thank Libo for bringing the village chief when he needed help. As a friend, Libo couldn't resist teasing him, saying that if Leang was truly grateful, he should hand over the 6 taels of silver he had just earned. Obviously, Leang ignored that completely, and instead got straight to the point, asking how much it cost to enroll in the Yang martial arts school. To his surprise, Libo grew really excited, especially since his father was about to send him there as well. The school charged 7 taels of silver for basic enrollment without lodging or meals, 10 taels if those were included, and 20 taels if one wanted to add medicinal baths to their training. While it was pricier than other schools, it was also the most prestigious, making it worth the cost. Leang agreed and couldn't help but smile, realizing he could definitely afford to enroll with his current budget. With everything he had earned over the past few days, he had gathered 9 taels of silver in total. Without hesitation, he told Libo they could sign up together the next day, which excited his friend even more since the timing worked out perfectly for both of them. But just as the moment felt right, their excitement was cut short. Leang's passive ability suddenly activated, sharpening his senses in a way that sent a chill down his spine. He could overhear conversations of people nearby as long as they were close to a water source. And this time, the voices came from none other than the Shao Manor. What he heard made his stomach drop. They weren't just talking about something random. They were specifically tracking him down. This was bad. Absolutely bad. If they were already onto him, he needed to power up fast.